YouTube? Ty Metalhead Weatherman. Hopefully you guys are doing well. I hope you guys enjoyed that short I tried to put up earlier. I was trying to be a little funny, but I literally did wake up from a nap when I actually saw the moderate risk it issued, which was kind of crazy. I was like, wait, what? And anyway, this video for tonight is going to be regarding what's up ahead, and this is really going to be a sneak peek into what could happen the first few weeks of the first really 2 weeks of March. So hope you guys are looking forward to that. But we'll go ahead and also look back at what we've been seeing from Winter Storm Piper across the west, and we'll briefly touch on some of the stuff that's happened with Olive as well. But basically with Piper, what we have going on here, and this is actually as of I think this was actually more so towards Thursday night. Wow, this is a little out of date here then. But already we were seeing significant snowfall across the Sierras and starting into the foothills around the bigger cities like Los Angeles towards SoCal. And these totals are probably a lot higher than what they are now, but I don't have access to the most up-to-date totals at this time, unfortunately. We are starting to see more activity begin to develop across states like Utah and, of course, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. There's been an increased amount of activity over Nevada, and that's going to continue as we head into tonight. So that's going to be another thing to look at. Of course, also we'll be watching the Northwest over the next 24 hours as there's going to be a storm system that rolls in there that brings in significant winter weather for a lot of regions over here, for pretty much all the states that you see in the picture here. So with that being said, we also have to keep an eye on what's happening out towards the Northeast, where we've had some pretty impressive snowfall totals over the last 24 hours, especially towards the northern reaches of New York. I'm going to try to pronounce this Adirondacks. I hope I got it right. If I don't, then daggone it. I'm honestly going to make a meme gag or something for this area right here, because I just have the hardest time trying to figure out how to pronounce this thing. Anyway, we're even seeing some possible accumulation over towards New York City and even some areas closer to the Long Island area, just a little off to the outside as of this report. But we'll see what ends up happening there. I do think that these totals did make it a little further south. But that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the picture across the country as a whole and look at the severe weather threat. So far, no severe today. That was already expected, but a lot of high wind warnings and wind advisories across a large part of the southwestern U.S., even heading into the southern plains here. And this is going to be a key component in what will spark our severe weather threat. Where tomorrow, of course, like I mentioned before, we have that moderate risk, but we're going to go quickly in depth with things here. This is actually a wind-driven moderate risk, and now we've gotten the hatched risk area added in as well. This even stretches into parts of the slight risk, where we have areas like even Springfield, Missouri in play, Joplin. You guys could be seeing significant damaging winds. That's up to about 75 miles an hour or more. We can also see this in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Woodward, Oklahoma City, Woodward, Norman, Fort Sill, and even some parts of the panhandle of Texas. And a lot of this will also sneak its way into southern Kansas as well. So anyone in these areas, make sure you are doing your proper severe weather precautions and be prepared for some nasty weather tomorrow evening into tomorrow night. I will be intending to live stream on this. Hopefully all goes well with that. Feel free to stop in and say hi. We'll see what happens with this. But we still have our slight risk hail threat and our slight risk tornado threat. But, and this is a little bit of an asterisk, but there is some talk of there being a slightly increased chance for maybe a hatched risk popping up around here towards the west a bit for a stronger tornado threat. This is also conditional based on the moisture returns that will be coming with this. We already went over the majority of this in the video this morning, so feel free to watch that if you want to. The link to that will be in the top right corner. Now we talked about that. We also have that slight risk for the day after on Monday. They have not expanded this area further south. I do think a marginal risk could be warranted towards the southeast. There are some parameters there. It's very conditional, but I'd say I'd give them at least a marginal risk just to try to get some eyes on it in case something bigger does happen. Am I certain that it will? I'm leaning more so towards probably not. I'm definitely hoping not because this is over towards my neck of the woods anyway. But we'll see what happens with that. But that's what we have going on over the course of the next 3 days. Let's go ahead and now take a look at the temperature outlook heading into March. Our negative PNA setup here is still in effect. Over towards the southeast, we're still above average, but we are starting to see a little bit of a downtrend here. The average over the next 6 to 10 days, a little bit lower unless you're over towards Florida, where we still have pretty high confidence of above average temperatures. And this does persist as we head later into the month. But look what's starting to happen here. As I've always said in some of my video, in a large part of these videos with the climate outlooks, whatever ends up happening out west eventually makes its way out to the east. The real thing to note here, though, is just how strong is this mass of cold air by the time it gets over to the east coast. This could diminish completely, or it could reinforce itself and be very strong. These outlooks are based on the average temperatures across these regions. So it may not be that much colder on a significant scale to where we could see 80, 90 percentile ranges. So this very well may look different. So we'll have to be watching this closely. One thing that we do know for a fact, though, is that we are in a very active pattern and it will be persisting. With the exception of a couple of patches in Texas and Florida, almost everybody from west coast to east coast here is expecting a either equal or above average chance of precipitation of some sort as we head into the first part of March. And this persists as time goes on, and even Florida starts to lose that below average precip here. As I've said before, even when we have these above average, below average precip things, it does not mean that you will get all the rain in the world or that you'll get zero rain. This only means that you will get an increased amount of precipitation compared to what you would normally see. How much that variation is, this map does not tell that. So I want to make sure that's clarified before we move on to the next deal here. So now let's go ahead and look at the models. Start out with the Euro. We'll look at the vorticity map over the next 10 days with this one. This goes up to about 240 hours. Here's our next storm system. Big inland cyclone coming in here, dragging in a boatload of cold air with it. Here's what's going to end up being our flashpoint tomorrow. And here's why I'm thinking that there could be a few discrete cells here. That forcing does kind of let up just a little bit for a brief period before things really start to fire off here. I think you may have a couple hour window of maybe a few discrete cells forming into supercells if that cap can break and if we get a good moisture return. Those are the two conditions that I see just from looking at this model here. As time goes on, there's increased probability of another severe threat on Monday. This will be mainly more so towards the afternoon, I would say, for a large portion of people. Towards the south, there could be a conditional severe threat towards the evening hours, or afternoon or evening hours, before we start to really look more so towards a winter weather threat. Now, this is going to also be tracking a good bit of cold air behind it, and it's going to set the stage for this next system to come in and be much more significant on the wintry side, especially for the northwest. So there could be some significant snow across this region here. And then we see this trough really start to dig in, drag those cold temperatures in there with it towards the midweek. Could be looking at a flash flood threat, maybe start trying to develop across this region. There's a decent bit of moisture flow from the subtropical jet here. As far as severe weather is concerned, I'm leaning more so towards no as of right now. But this trough will have to be watched because even though it has a positive to neutral tilt, we are going to have to keep an eye on the front flank of this. Things can easily change with that. So once that gets moving, This does look like it has some potential for a wintry type setup. I don't think there's going to be enough of a moisture return out ahead of it here to really produce much, but we'll go ahead and see what happens with it here. As we move this forward, we get back onto a warming trend. We're kind of in that little bit of a seesaw pattern here. Next storm system comes in. This is around the 5th of March. Very elongated trough though, so this is going to be a little tricky to forecast. But it does look like a little bit of additional cold air is going to try to funnel its way back in across the west. But this will also end up leaving the southeast a bit warmer, so it could set the stage for a later event. Make comparison to the Canadian, and we are looking at something a tiny bit different. Also, let's keep in mind that we are now dealing with the 18Z model runs. Since the Canadian only updates every 12 hours, we can only go off of the afternoon model, and I'm also looking at the afternoon Euro model as well, so these might be a little bit out of date. These could look entirely different by the next day, so let's keep that in mind as well. So this is our current storm system, going to be causing our severe weather. Notice how different these two look right now. We have a little bit stronger forcing with this, so this definitely would lean more into the linear type supercell type event, more so than just discrete storms for a small window. But even then, those damaging winds can do just as much damage as a small tornado, so that has to be kept in mind as well. As we go forward, it's a pretty similar deal. Positively tilted trough. Does dip a little further south. Be interesting to see what ends up happening with this, but it never quite makes that negative tilt, but that neutral tilt can be a little tricky. So we'll keep an eye on that, and this is heading towards the 3rd. 5th on this one actually looks quiet. A big ridge starts to set up here across the midwestern part of the U.S. and towards the south. It starts to really warm up again. And it looks a little bit quieter on the Canadian run. If we make that comparison to the GFS, and this time we're going to go all the way to the 16-day period, through the 16-day period here. It's a similar look to the Euro so far. And again, you see that potential for that line of storms, but just before then, there's that point where if the cap breaks across this region right here. Oh wow, I didn't know this changed over. But right across this region here, if that cap breaks, there could be a couple extra prefrontal storms and the tornado threat could increase. So that's something that definitely needs to be watched here. So as we draw this forward a little further, line of storms develops, and then this has started to take a little bit of a change here. This is an 18Z Euro by the GFS, by the way, excuse me. And we kind of have a similar deal, but this is starting to favor more the Ohio Valley as far as the severe threat's concerned, and it's also leaning towards a bit of a cold core threat. It'll be interesting to see what the hazard probability will end up being with this as we go forward. I'm not going to look at any soundings on this one today. I say that, and then the computer sometimes will end up doing it for me. This also has a little bit more of a warm core setup to it, so this may limit snowfall potential. We still could see it over towards maybe Wisconsin and parts of Michigan, but as far as other areas, it's looking a little bit quieter. We could see a little Goldilocks zone develop here around Minnesota and both the Dakotas, and see a small pocket of snow develop here. It'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. And then, of course, here's our next system heading across the northwest. GFS looks very active, and this is going to make things a little bit frustrating to forecast as time goes on here. We do see a little bit of that atmospheric river flow, which I'm a little concerned about for you guys out west. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. This drags in a little bit more cold air. And over towards Arizona now, we could be dealing with a big-time winter storm. So we'll be watching you guys closer. And then also, this trough on the GFS actually takes a little bit of a negative tilt. This actually does end up going into the negative a bit, so we have to keep an eye on this area now over here towards the southeast for potential severe weather. So anywhere across this region here, just past the Ozarks, we may have to watch for a threat of severe thunderstorms. We could have all three hazards in play, but this is 135 hours out. This is quick to change. This could be very quickly. This is going to be a quickly evolving situation. But that being said, like I said, a lot to keep an eye on here. Oops, didn't mean to have that go up. Get the time frame back. But as this goes forward, a severe threat could continue to persist here as we head into the following week. Well, into this week as time goes on, maybe even out towards as far as Atlanta, maybe a little bit further east than that into the Carolinas. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out as we go forward. Little cold blast tries to sneak its way in later or this following weekend, not this weekend, really quickly, and then we're back on that warming trend just like we've seen on the last two models, and then big time trough comes in. This one a little bit more with a little bit more amplitude than the last couple, but ultimately this sets the stage for another big series of troughs to come in, and basically we're gonna have an active March. It looks like, even though we aren't seeing any effects from the polar vortex just yet. It sometimes could take a few weeks, and even then the effects are still unknown. But this could cause a very active storm pattern, and we may not see it in the form of temperatures. So there could be a number of things in play here as a result of just that little bit of a stratospheric heating event that we had going on to cause this. So that being said, let's go ahead and look at the temperatures and look at the precip. All right, so here we are looking at the temperatures. Took a few of those tabs out to try to make things move a little more smoothly, but we already know the deal for this weekend, so we're going to just jump ahead into Monday here. Of course, it's going to be a little bit warmer across the southeast as we head into the afternoon. Even the mornings are going to be pretty warm over here across this region. Just warm temperatures all across the board for a lot of us here. We're starting to see a bit of warming now starting to work its way a little bit to the west here towards the higher elevations. That's where the coldest temperatures will be. But we're now starting to even see those 60s sneaking back into the picture around Arizona and even parts of New Mexico, Southern California. As quickly as you got that snow, a lot of it's going to start to melt. That's if there's any sort of positive to be had there, that's it. It's not going to be lingering snow for weeks and weeks on end like what you would see further up north. We start on Tuesday here, and we see that warm air continuing to dominate across the south. And we'll see this next storm system clear out, and a new cold blast will come in and kind of solidify this negative PNA across the west. The cold front does try to sneak in across the southeast. You do get one cold morning across Saturday of next week, and then by Sunday, we're right back to where we were before. So we head into the last little bit of these 10 days on the forecast model. We do see a bit of cold air starting to return here, especially over towards the northern tier of the U.S. We could see some morning lows towards the negatives as we head into about, I'd say, the end of the weekend, especially towards the start of the week, about 2 weeks out from now. The Canadian, the GDPS, is on a similar look. Still see the same pattern for the most part. There's a lot of confidence in this so far. And of course, here we are heading into Sunday. Not quite as cold as the Euro, but that cold air is on our doorstep here towards the border. We'll be watching to see if that pushes a little bit more. Usually the Canadian often ends up hopping on one of these two trains, either with the Euro or the GFS. Speaking of the GFS, let's go ahead and take a look at that. If I can get this to work. Uh-oh. There we go. Scared me for a second. Start out with a similar look. And as we head into the weekend, to the middle of the week, it gets a lot colder across the mountaintops. And that cold air does come in a little bit stronger as we head towards the latter half of the midweek, especially as we look towards Thursday morning. Could be a very cold weekend ahead as we look towards next Saturday. And then Sunday morning could be pretty frigid across those mountaintops. So we head into the weeks, or the first real week of March. This cold air is going to be just kind of lingering around the north. Just isn't really able to push its way down to the south. It's cut off a little bit by the way our trough has been moving. So as a result, most of that cold air is going to stay up north. There's going to be a warming trend across the south, but this could also mean multiple battle zones as far as not only wintry weather, but severe weather could be possible in the weeks ahead. So any of these storm systems that come through are going to have to be watched extremely close, because with this kind of setup, it may not take much. Just exactly what we will get, it's just a little too far out to tell. So last thing to really look at right now is the precip outlooks, and I haven't even had a good look at these just yet. So here comes our precip models here. Took a little longer to load than expected. Here is where our snow has been falling across parts of SoCal. Even around LA today, there was a report of snow flurries. Even across Fontana, where there was a NASCAR race going on. It was caught on video, which was pretty surreal. See that snow continue to persist as time goes on, and then our new system sneaks its way into the northwest. Here's our severe weather threat for tomorrow, and then as we go forward, we have to watch this area towards the south for a marginal severe threat, possibly. Our secondary system comes in the start of the week. Big time snow across the Sierras, and we'll watch this system roll in, try to materialize, but not much will come out of it. We do have to watch this little area right here for potential showers and thunderstorms across the southeast. Going to be a very active pattern across here, where you could see a potential for flash flooding, as these storms could be persistent across this region throughout the course of the midweek and even beyond. Look at that. This doesn't really lend itself towards much of a severe threat right now. Marginal to slight risk wouldn't be ruled out. But look what also happens as we head towards the end of this week. This is what I was a little bit concerned about. This tries to take the shape of a nor'easter, and it's pretty far to the south, so this could even affect the Long Island regions. It could affect New York. You guys have been looking like you might be due for a winter storm of some kind, and this could very well be it. Oh wow, that was a weird scan right there. But we head towards the following week, the first full week of March here. Another big storm system to look at towards the Great Lakes here, and some of the Midwest, even some of the far northern states, and then another storm system heading across the southeast to bring showers and thunderstorms there. So pretty active pattern so far. Really, that's going to be across the board for all three models. The significance of the Canadian is going to be a little bit different. So we do see a little bit of an ice threat develop right here with the Canadian model, which I find interesting, over towards Philly and New York. We're going to keep a close eye on that. You'll start out as snow, transition to wintry mix, and probably end out as rain for a lot of you guys there towards the midweek. And then another storm tries to sneak its way in. Mostly going to be warm here on this one, so we're going to end up as rain. Flood threat still persisting across the southeast as we head into the week, towards the end of the week. But the snow line does look like it's a little bit further south on this one, so that's going to be interesting to watch. We could see some snow across the Appalachians, and then a little bit further to the south here could be a few showers and thunderstorms with flooding potential, maybe a little bit of severe potential. I think that's going to be pretty limited at this point. Could see some backside snow towards the Carolinas and Virginia, maybe even West Virginia too. And then as we go forward, we're going to see these storm systems persisting out west, and we'll see what ends up happening with those. Timing's a bit different with the Euro, so we're going to have to just bear with and see what happens next. Now, on to the big one, the GFS here. GFS is going to be a little lengthy here. We'll start out by looking at what we could be seeing heading into Monday night. Large line of storms, and I'm starting to see this trend here where we're starting to see more and more ice develop over here towards northern Wisconsin. I've seen that on the Canadian. I've seen that on the GFS. I do find that a bit interesting, and that's something that's definitely noteworthy. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. We'll see it eventually transition into snow, after as the low starts to deepen here. But we'll also have to keep an eye on, again, Philly, New York, some of that Long Island region. We could see some snow, but eventually we transition back towards rain at the end of this. And then the next storm system comes in. We'll have to watch that extremely close. So we head towards the latter half of the week. It's a pretty similar deal. This does look like it. This is the one that I was talking about where the Canadian had that as a neutral or positive, even positive tilted trough. On this one, low deepens and we get that negative tilt, and this is the result. Snow, ice, wintry mix possible across the Ohio Valley, severe weather across the south, maybe a line of thunderstorms. And then we see potential nor'easter taking shape to round out that end of the week. Then here comes the next storm system for the northwest here. Small scale storm in this case, but this clipper does work its way towards New York. You could see a little bit of rain and snow. This next storm is going to be pretty warm, so a lot of the snow is going to be north of the border on this one. So we start in the midweek for the first full week of March. Then we see this interesting storm try to develop here. There's a little bit of a moisture return, good moisture flow, but nothing to really take advantage of that. Then that cold air tries to make a quick push to the south here, and we may see some snow up towards West Virginia and Virginia. And then eventually we may see potential for yet another nor'easter, but this is really far out at this point. So have to take that one with a grain of salt. But that's pretty much all we have here from the GFS, and this is all I got for the video right now. A lot to keep an eye on here. We were anticipating this because I put up a March outlook about maybe a week or so ago, so this isn't surprising. But even so, we'll be keeping an eye on all of this on the channel here, so stay tuned. If you found the video useful, by the way, you already know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, or do the double click if you haven't subscribed especially. Share this video to anybody that may find this useful, and feel free to mention in the comments what you're seeing in your area right now and in the days to come. But anyway, this has been Tyler Metalhead Weatherman. I'll see you guys in the morning actually, and I might see you guys with a live stream tomorrow afternoon. More than likely I will. But until then, I'll see you guys later. Take care. Have a good night.